a video on the breather hose for the 460 Gwagen. So this is actually the breather hose housing, and this is normally situated in your left side front suspension strut housing. And I decided to replace all the breather hose on my vehicle because it was snapped and cracked. And this is the original stuff. It's got Meccano Bundi PA12 on it. PA I think just means polyamide, and it's a nylon hose. And a cleverer person than me told me it's 8mm line. So I actually just found some locally made because I had trouble finding it on the EPC. You can see how this hose sits into the housing, which is then bolted into the engine bay. So it's normally situated in the suspension strut, and after a V8 transplant, it's very hard to get access to that. You can see it sits above that brake line fitting. You'll see this in your Gwagen if you have a look. Much easier to see without the V8. And so I've taken it out and decided to put this in a far more accessible area because I want to replace all the line, and feeding that up through the bottom of that suspension housing strut is very difficult. So I decided to put this at the front of the engine bay, and I appreciate diving into water obstacles. That becomes a low point, but it's still higher, and in reality I'm not submersing my Gwagen anytime soon after its years of service. So that's where I decided to put it. And this is the local Australian made nylon, which made me happy to buy an Australian product. I hope I wasn't getting sold a dummy. Just 8mm hosing, nylon tube. And so the breather hose here, which you can see is far more flexible now. These come off the rear diff, the front diff, the transfer case. You can see at the rear diff here, just above or adjacent the differential, you've got the metal line off the diff, and then the flexible hose I'm pointing with the torch. Sorry, I'm one-armed here. So that simply slides off. And then from the rear diff, this runs forward along the left side chassis rail above the fuel assembly. The underside of my G needs a good thorough cleaning. Running along there, I've tried to use some of the clips and retainers, but I'm not too fussed. And then it runs up, and with the engine transplant, this gets really messy up here. But I've got a whole bunch of these breather hoses which are snapped, which are doing absolutely nothing. So I'm actually just running them right up here to the front, out of the way of the exhaust manifolds. Sorry, that's not really showing you too much there. You can see the breather hose housing just up the top, where I'm going to aim for. And at the bottom of that housing is about 6 slots which you can plug that tube into. And they're not really plugging into anything, they're just keeping out of the way of water and debris. There's the front diff and the old hosing going up. And so I'm just changing hands here, I think. You can see actually just pull that thing off, and that was a snapped line from memory. And that's all it is. You can see the heat's made that thing very rigid. And so if I get my torch in there upside down now, looking up at the bottom of the breather hose housing, that's where you feed the lines into. It's just to retain them there. There's nothing magical about this thing. You can just put the lines anywhere really, as long as they're up high. So there's my rear diff line now coming up there. And once I get the front diff and the transfer case, I'll slot them up there as well. I've fit the 461 and 463 air intake snorkels. That's what that circle is on the side.